Hello, West Hill. Last week we concluded our study on the 4 prayers. This week we're going to start a new study, which I've entitled Sometimes Less is More. And now here's the backing behind my particular study. There are 5 books in the Bible. 5 books in the Bible, all of them having only 1 chapter. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes, even in the smallest of books, you can find some great information, some great backing, some great pushes for the Christian. Now, those 5 books, you have Obadiah in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, you have Philemon, you have 2nd and 3rd John, and then you have Jude. 5 books in the Bible with 1 chapter each. Now, we're doing this through the month of February. There's only four Sundays in the month of February. So we're going to have to get rid of one. We'll talk about that here in a second. But the reason we have to get rid of one of those is I also want to put in a plug for the Sunday classes in the month of March. Lord willing, we will be back having auditorium classes for the kids as well, in the building in the month of March. And we're so looking forward to that. In March and then in April, we're going to be doing some classes that are going to be very, very beneficial for the congregation, for each and every one of us. Both of these classes, 2 separate ones, one in March and then one in April, are going to have to do with different methods that we can partake in bringing the gospel to someone. So, in the month of March, those Sundays in the month of March, we're going to be looking through the book of John, and we're going to essentially be letting John show the people. So we're going to be looking through the book of John, gathering information, how we might be able to preach the good news, teach the good news in the comfort of our home, at our dining room table, to individuals who might be seeking the truth simply from the book of John. And then in the month of April, we're also going to be going through those familiar booklets called Back to the Bible, and we look forward to going through these as well. Some step-by-step approaches in those 3 books that will help you, give you some good methods, some good tools that you might also decide that you want to bring to the study as you are studying with non-Christians. So I look forward to those two different methods, those 2 different studies on how to teach people. But saying that, we're in a time crunch. There are 5 books with 1 chapter each, but there's only 4 weeks. So I'm going to get rid of one. This is the one I'm going to get rid of for our study over the next 4 weeks. I'm going to get rid of the book of Philemon. And here's my logic. Usually I'd get rid of the one in the Old Testament, the book of Obadiah. But the book of Philemon, we are actually going to talk about. I believe it's all the way in December, if I remember the schedule correctly. All the way in the month of December with our Colossians study. With our Colossians study on being the church, well, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on the book of Philemon. So we're not going to discuss the book of Philemon here in the month of February. Instead, we're going to do the other 4. We're going to do Obadiah today. We're going to do 2nd and 3rd John and Jude over the next 3 weeks as well. So go ahead and be turning open to the book of Obadiah in the Old Testament. You're going to turn there, you're going to leave your finger there, because we're just going to read 1 verse and then we're going to go to the book of Genesis. But I want you to go over to Obadiah chapter 1. We're not going to spend too much time on an introduction as to who this is written to, at what time. Quite honestly, this book is one of the hardest books for individuals to try to figure out. When was the book written? There's a long time frame. I read that it's anywhere really from 900 BC to 400 BC. Somewhere in that time frame is whenever they think this book was written. We don't even really know who the author was. There are so many Obadiahs written about, so we don't really know who Obadiah is. We know that this is inspired. We know that there's a lot that we can learn from it, and that's what we're going to really discuss this morning or this afternoon whenever you're watching this video. But look with me at verse 1, just so that we can see who is the object, if you will, of this particular book. Chapter 1, only 1 chapter, verse 1, the book of Obadiah. The vision of Obadiah. Thus says the Lord God concerning Edom. Okay? Who is Edom? Who is Edom? Well, you might remember who Edom is. We'll read a verse to kind of back this up later as well, but I do want you to skip down just in the context of what we're talking about. I want you to skip down to verse 6. Look at verse 6. It says, "Oh, how Esau will be ransacked." Esau, Edom, same individual that we're talking about, but Esau's family is going to go, and Esau's family is going to become the nation of Edom. This book, whether it was actually written to Edom or whether it was written maybe to Judah about Edom, the object of this book has to do with Edom. Now, who was their father? Who was their forefather, if you will? It was Esau. You remember the two twins, Jacob and Esau. I want you to go back to Genesis. Let's go to Genesis and let's go to chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25. We're going to see a struggle, a great struggle between two brothers, between Jacob and Esau, the two twins who are going to struggle. If you're there with me in Genesis chapter 25, read with me starting in verse 22. In verse 22, it says, "But the children struggled together within her." What does this mean? Well, Rebekah, their mother, is pregnant with them. They're twins. Even at the point of pregnancy, they are struggling with one another. And she said, "If it is so," verse 22, "why then am I this way?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples will be separated from your body. And one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." Now, there's a lot wrong in that particular culture with this, because the younger is supposed to serve the older in this particular culture. But God is already predicting, God is already saying, prophesying, this is not going to be the case. Well, the two young men, whenever they are born, Esau is the oldest, Jacob is the youngest. Well, we're going to read, if you were to read the entire context, you would see that the youngest, Jacob, is the mother, Rebekah's favorite. And the oldest, Esau, is the father's favorite. There's a lot of problems there, isn't there? That there'd be these favorites, that there'd be this favoritism. But there's going to be a lot of problems, and I want you to skip down with me to verse 28. Now, Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for gain, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Keep reading. "When Jacob had cooked stew, Esau came in from the field and was famished. And Esau said to Jacob, 'Please let me have a swallow of that red stuff. Therefore I am famished.'" Notice this. "Therefore his name was called Edom." Chapter 25, verse 30. His name is called Edom, meaning red. Okay? This Edom means red. And so he ate this red stew, this red stuff. Therefore he is called Edom, and his people are now going to be called Edom. "But Jacob said," verse 31, "First sell me your birthright." Esau said, "Because I am about to die, so that what use then is this birthright to me?" Verse 33, "And Jacob said, 'First swear to me.' So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went on his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright." Sold his birthright for nothing more than a bowl of red stew. Well, if you were to go on and if you were to read in chapter 27, we're not going to read all of it for time's sake, but in chapter 27, you'll remember that their father Isaac is dying. Their father Isaac is dying, and he wants to give his son, his favorite son, the oldest son, Esau, a blessing. So he calls Esau to his side, says, "Go and prepare the game, go and prepare the meal for me." And in the process, his wife, Rebekah, hears what's going on, knows what's going on. She calls the youngest, Jacob, and she helps him deceive their father by putting stuff on his arms to make it appear that he is hairy like his brother Esau. She helps cook, she helps prepare, gets him ready, tells him exactly what to prepare, what to bring in, and he goes in and he acts like he's Esau, and he steals the blessing from Esau. You know the end of the story. How, of course, Esau in verse 41, we will read this in verse 41, Esau is so upset, so angry at his brother Jacob. It says, so Esau bore a grudge, verse 41 in chapter 27, against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him for what he has done to me. Hatred. They absolutely hated one another. Now you may also know the further part of the story in Genesis chapter 33. Up to this time, Jacob found out that he will die if he stays around. So he runs away. He runs away for many years. He gets married not once but twice, has two wives. They have many children. They become very, very rich. They come back, and actually Jacob and Esau are reconciled. They're reconciled. Their relationship seems to be amended. The time and the space away helped them out tremendously. But there's still always going to be a rift. There's still always going to be the separation between the two groups, the family of Jacob and the family of Esau. There's going to be this huge, huge problem. And as a matter of fact, I want you to turn over with me to chapter 20 of the book of Numbers. Go over to Numbers chapter 20. Numbers chapter 20, verses 14 through 21 is what we're going to read. Numbers chapter 20, verses 14 through 21. Let me give you, let me catch you up to speed as to what's taking place here. The children of Israel have already had to go to the land of Egypt, and they went to the land of Egypt because of the famine. They stayed there for a great deal of time, became slaves. Moses has come in. Thanks to the Lord, he set them free with, of course, the plagues from God. They've come through the Red Sea. They're in the wilderness. They're trying to go into the land of Canaan. The spies come back and say, nope, we can't go. We can't go to the land of Canaan. But Moses himself has just sinned in the fact that he, in this chapter, Numbers chapter 20, God told him, you go speak to that rock, and you speak to that rock and water will come out. No, he goes and he slams the rock, and he gets onto the people and almost brings a bit of pride on himself, taking advantage of the situation. Am I the one? Are we the ones who's supposed to take care of you? And because of this, Moses has even just been told, hey, you don't get to go to the land of Canaan. Well, this is what's just taken place in context here in Numbers chapter 20. Things are going terrible for Israel, just terrible. So we get to verse 14. It says, from Kadesh, Moses then sent messengers to the king of Edom. Thus your brothers, this is what Moses is saying, thus your brother Israel has said, you know all the hardship that has befallen us, and that our fathers went down to Egypt, and we stayed in Egypt a long time. And the Egyptians treated us and our fathers badly. Verse 16, but when we cried out to the Lord, he heard our voice and sent an angel and brought us out from Egypt. Now behold, we are at Kadesh, a town on the edge of your territory. Please let us pass through your land. We will not pass through field or through vineyard. We will not even drink water from a well. We will go along the king's highway, not turning to the right or left until we pass through your territory. Can we please just come through? Please let us pass through. We will not destroy anything. Verse 18, Edom, the king of Edom, however, said to him, you shall not pass through us, or I will come out with the sword against you. Verse 19, again the sons of Israel said to him, we will go up by the highway, and if I and my livestock do drink any of the water, then I will pay its price. Let me only pass through on my feet, nothing else. But he said, verse 20, the king of Edom, you shall not pass through. And Edom came out against him with a heavy force and with a strong hand. Verse 21, thus Edom refused to allow Israel to pass through his territory, so Israel turned away from him. A rocky relationship from the get-go, all the way from the womb to this particular point. Now these people do not appreciate one another, do not trust one another. There's hatred, there's resentment, and there is no love, there's no compassion. there's no help whatsoever. With that in mind, please go back to the book of Obadiah. Let's look at the book of Obadiah. That's just kind of the history, if you will. Now, this book of Obadiah is going to show the final destruction of Edom. It's going to show how Edom has been evil for some time, and now they are going to suffer the consequences, and they are going to be destroyed. So this is a prophecy against Edom. Again, as we stated before early on, this might have been a prophecy sent to Edom, or it may have just been sent to Judah to give Judah some peace about their neighbors, their distant relatives now who hate them and who have been cruel to them. There's a reason, the first reason, if you will, about this particular punishment. Before I say it, I do want to say this as well. A kind of funny quote for those of you who have been at West Hill for a long time. You may recognize the name Johnny Ramsey, a preacher here at West Hill many years ago. This is what Johnny Ramsey had to say about this particular destruction that's getting ready to take place to Edom. He said this: "It was the high price of a bowl of soup." So you think about this entire context, this entire history of what is taking place here leading up to the book of Obadiah, and just a high price to pay for selling your birthright and then being this evil nation against others with no compassion, no help. And then it really, as we're going to see, brings home an issue that we need to listen to and understand. These people are getting ready to be destroyed. Why? It's because of their arrogance. It's because of their arrogance. Let's read verses 1 through 4 together. The vision of Obadiah. Thus says the Lord God concerning Edom. We have heard a report from the Lord, and an envoy has been sent among the nations, saying, Arise and let us go against her for battle. Behold, I will make you small among the nations. You are greatly despised. Notice verse 3. The arrogance of your heart has deceived you. You who lived in the cleft of the rock, they lived up in high places, elevation speaking. You who lived in the cleft of the rock, in the loftiness of your dwelling place, who say in your heart, notice this question right here that they're getting ready to ask. Who will bring me, who will bring us down to earth? Here we are up in these mountains. Here we are up high. Who could ever come and destroy us? God has an answer for them, and it's not the answer that they want. Verse 4. Though you build high like the eagle, though you set your nest among the stars, from there, God says, I will bring you down, declares the Lord. You have arrogance. You believe no one can touch you. I can touch you. I can destroy you, is what he's saying right here. And I will. I will bring you down. The question, who can take us down? God answers, I can and I will. We don't want to hear that, do we? We do not want to hear that at all. But here he's saying, I can and I will. Look with me at verses 5 and following. Let's read 5 through 9. We'll stop and give some commentary or some thoughts as we go along. But look with me at verse 5. If thieves came to you, if robbers by night, how, oh how, you will be ruined. However, if you will, would they not steal only until they had enough? This is what I understand. This is what I believe, and thanks in part to some others who have written about this as well. I believe this is what God is saying right here. If someone comes in and steals, robs from your home, they're going to come in and they're going to take what they want. They're going to take all that they think is valuable, but really all that they can get at the time. Even a robber who comes in and takes everything that is worth money is still going to leave some things behind. He's not going to be able to get everything. Keep reading, verse 5 still. If grape gatherers came to you, would they not leave some gleanings? Okay, they're in the vineyards. If someone were to come and gather the grapes from the vines, they'll probably still leave some. You can't just come and grab them all at once because, well, they might rot. You want to take them at different times. Take those that are ripe and then leave some more for later on, also so that they don't rot whenever you pull them off the vine because you don't use them soon enough. Some of the grapes would still be left there. Verse 6, oh, how Esau will be ransacked and his hidden treasures searched out. It's as if he's saying, hey, even to the point that a robber's going to come in and still leave some, a gleaner's going to come in and still leave some. Not so with this. It's going to be completely destroyed. Verse 7, all the men allied with you will send you forth to the border, and the men at peace with you will deceive you and overpower you. They who eat your bread, still in verse 7, will set an ambush for you. There is no understanding in him. Will I, verse 8, will I not on that day, declares the Lord, destroy wise men from Edom and understanding from the mountain of Esau? Then, verse 9, your mighty men will be dismayed, O Teman, so that everyone may be cut off from the mountains of the Esau by slaughter. What do we see here? We just see complete and utter destruction is coming for you, Esau. This isn't a fun book whatsoever. Complete destruction is coming to the land of Edom, coming to the descendants of Esau. And why? Why is this the case? Well, first reason is because of arrogance. Because you have great arrogance and you give no regard for the Lord whatsoever. You are so prideful in your own eyes. There's more, of course, that they did. Arrogance is terrible, but arrogance is going to cause you to do certain things, right? Well, let's keep reading. Let's read verses 10 through 16. We're going to see several different actions that are going to take place, maybe because simply they were arrogant. But look at verse 10. Because of violence, there's actual violence taking place. To your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame, and you will be cut off forever. Verse 11, on that day that you stood aloof, on the day that strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered the gate and cast lots for Jerusalem, you too were as one of them. Do not gloat over your brother's day, the day that his misfortune, and do not rejoice over the sons of Judah in the day of their destruction. Yes, do not boast in the day of their distress. Do not enter the gate of my people in the day of their disaster. Yes, you do not gloat over their calamity in the day of their disaster, and do not loot their wealth in the land in the day of their disaster. Do not stand at the fork of the road to cut down their fugitives, and do not imprison their survivors. It would appear as if these individuals at some other time, maybe whenever Jerusalem was being invaded, that they stood there, they might have had the opportunity to help their brothers of Israel, but they refused to do so. Notice some of the words that we just read. They stood aloof. Verse 12, they gloated about what was taking place. They rejoiced, verse 12, over what was taking place against their brothers. They were boasting. It says here they entered the gate of the people. Maybe it was the case that here they are, they're just walking into town, they're walking into a destroyed area without asking. They're coming through. They didn't come before, but now they're coming in. They're coming in as if they own the place. Very, very prideful. There's violence taking place. They're standing in the way, maybe figuratively speaking, maybe truthfully speaking, verse 14, to cut down those who are running away from the disaster. Edom was terrible in some way, some portion, to their brothers, the land of Israel, those of Judah. Keep reading. It says, and do not imprison their survivors in the day of their distress. I want us to go now, and I want us to let's keep reading verses 15 and 16. It says, for the day of the Lord draws near on all the nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your dealings will return on your own head. Because just as you drank on my holy mountain, all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and swallow and become as if they had never existed. And then I want us to look at 17 through 21, this final destruction. But on Mount Zion, verse 17, there will be those who escape, and it will be holy. and the house of Jacob will possess their possessions. Then the house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, but the house of Esau will be stubble. Israel, Jacob is going to continue on. And could it be that there's also a little bit in there about you and I as well? In the kingdom, we are spiritual Israel. We are continuing on through the line, of course, of Jacob. Esau, though, is going to be destroyed. Going to be nothing but stubble right there in verse 18. And they will set them on fire and consume them, so that there will be no survivor of the house of Esau. And this is exactly what took place. They just kind of were destroyed and absorbed into the Arab culture. There is no more Edom. There is no more Esau, family of Esau. For the Lord, verse 18, has spoken. Then those of the Negev will possess the mountain of Esau, and those of the Shephelah and the Philistine plain also possess the territory of Ephraim and the territory of Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead, and the exiles of this host of the sons of Israel who are among the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, and the exiles of Jerusalem who are in Sepharad will possess the cities of the Negev. The deliverers will ascend Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. Okay, we read through that, and we read through that rather quickly. Here's what you and I can learn. We need to remember not to have pride. We need to remember not to have pride. I want to read a couple quotes to you, a couple things to keep in mind. And I got these ideas from Brother Eddie Parrish, who did a sermon on this particular book, and I read some of his info from it. But he quotes Muhammad Ali. We know Muhammad Ali was a great boxer, a great athlete. He was also one who had a little bit of pride, a little bit of arrogance, didn't he? A part of it may have been a show, but a lot of it was, arrogance. This was something he said in 1971 before a fight that he had with Joe Frazier. He said, "There seems to be some confusion. We're going to clear this confusion up on March 8th. We're going to decide once and for all who is king. There's not a man alive who can whip me. I'm too smart. I'm too pretty. I'm the greatest. I'm the king. I should be a postage stamp because that's the only way I could get licked." Guess what happened? He lost. He lost that particular match. And sometimes that's what happens to us. When we get arrogant, when we get prideful, when we are thinking that we are greater than anyone else or there's nothing we cannot do wrong, that's whenever we are humbled. And that's what happened to Edom. I want to read this. This is just a quote from Brother Parrish. He wrote this: "It is pride, arrogance, pride. It is pride that deceives us into thinking that God doesn't care how we worship. It is pride that deceives us into thinking that the works of the flesh are not at all that bad. It is pride that deceives us into thinking that God isn't really looking out for our best interests. It is pride that deceives us into thinking that we must police the brotherhood and verbally bludgeon anyone who doesn't adopt or views our views in matters of opinion. It is pride that deceives us into thinking that we can put question marks where God puts periods." Great quote right there from Brother Parrish. Pride causes us to do so much harm. Causes us to do harm in our own families. Causes us to do harm in the congregation. We need to stay away from pride. James chapter 4 and verse 6 says, "God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble." We also read in the book of Proverbs, "Do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him." Pride. Pride is terrible. Pride belittles us, even though we think that we're putting ourselves up on a pedestal. It belittles us. It brings us down. It causes us to be foolish. We need to make sure that we are those who have nothing to do with pride. And it's hard, isn't it? It's very difficult because we want to make sure that we're taken care of. We want to make sure that our best interests are at hand. maybe we need to be more like Christ and put others before self. Get rid of the pride. Humble ourselves. Be more like Christ. Let's watch out for pride. Let's watch out for arrogance. Here's another thought for us to consider, and then the class will be yours. One reaps what he sows. Edom, what did they reap? And they reaped violence. They reaped an attitude towards their brothers there in Judah, of violence and one of hate and one of arrogance. And because of that, they're going to reap that hate and that destruction as well. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. I want to read Obadiah chapter 1, but verse 15 one more time, and then the lesson is yours. Verse 15 says, for the day of the Lord draws near on all the nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. It says, your dealings will return on your own head. Let's remember that. Let's make sure that we are constantly striving to act in such a way that is not full of pride, that is not doing something against someone else. Because if we do that, we're going to suffer the consequences. God has given us a way that we do not need to be destroyed for all of eternity. Instead, we can live with Him. We can serve Him constantly. We can live a perfect, pain-free life for all of eternity whenever we go to heaven. So why do we think that we are indeed individuals who are worthy of having some pride, worthy of having some arrogance, worthy of being cruel and mean to other individuals? Let's let that never be the case for us. I appreciate your time in this study, and we'll see you again next week.